I'm actually in the middle of Vancouver Island, which is in Canada, and it's pretty much as far away from civilization as you can get. So I know when we first moved up here, my wife actually said, Paul, don't take the baby out of the car. There are eagles. So, but it's beautiful. There's lots of mountains up here and rivers. I don't know if you guys, has anyone ever been to Canada, Vancouver Island? Yeah. But it's very small towny. I reminded my wife that it's beautiful up here, and she said, yeah, it's a nice town. If you fall asleep on the bus, you might get pregnant. So anyway, we might be moving soon, don't know. But that's where we're at. And, you know, with that small towny feel, I wanted to get into this today with, first up, with Shane Levy, who has a great story in this anthology called Fighting the Last War, which is a bunch of people are at this local movie theater, and there's like some juvenile delinquents and they're causing trouble. And it seems to me that it's like set in a small town. Is that like a place that you grew up in, Shane?
Yeah, more or less. The story was actually inspired by a trip to the cinema, which was in Sligo, which is a small enough town near me. And that's the west of Ireland. That's where I grew up. So the language of all these boys is the language that I spent every year of secondary school hearing, you know. It's very much channeling that.
Yeah, I was fascinated by how you wrote in dialect as well. Like you're using like the intonation, and I wasn't sure if it was rural or if it was urban Ireland there, but it really made me connect to your lead character more, and I thought that was great. Is that something that you do a lot in your writing, with like writing dialects?
It's really a first time for me. I had tended to write a more formal third person past tense style. And as I was thinking about this story, I thought that didn't really suit. And bit by bit, I began to drift more and more into this very personal first person dialect kind of language, to hopefully kind of show the turmoil that this main character is feeling from their own perspective, you know.
Yeah, it's interesting too. And then I was thinking, wow, he's got to like proofread this and make sure if he's using one quotation mark to make sure the word was right, or italics or whatever it was. There's a whole new element there of work for you, but it really worked well. And there's like all this fighting that goes on in your story. Are are you practiced at like bar fighting at all, Shane? Or are you like
No.
the Punisher that goes into a bar and you use the furniture or kill someone with a shot glass?
No, not at all. You know, I was a quiet kid, but I did karate for a few years as a teenager. But I think it's the fighting that's in my story is more the kind of scrappy real life fighting that's disorganized, ugly, not very effective for the most part. You know, people hurt their hands by punching people in the face, chaotic and ugly, as opposed to Punisher, you know, going in there to lay waste. So
right.
yeah,
It's
real
very,
life stuff.
it came off so realistic when I was reading it. I loved it. And your lead character, one more question for you that I had. He's just filled with so much rage, and you give us a little backstory there of why that might be. It's almost like unrequited rage, if you want. But how much of that is from like your personal experience, or is any of it?
Um, that character is not like me, but what I did notice is I do think that a lot of the time when people fall into conflict, um, they are like the title of the story. They're fighting the last war. Um, they're sensitive to something the other person has said or done because of things that happened way back in the past. So even when I went to the cinema and I had this experience of a bunch of teenage boys kicking up a fuss and causing trouble nearby and kind of ruining the film for the rest of us, I was so annoyed. And afterwards, I asked myself, did that get to me? Because I'm a calm person by nature, and it infuriated me. But then I thought it's because when I was that age, those were the kids who terrified me. You know, it's so when you're 16 or something, you're or younger, things that are happening are kind of being printed on your character, and you may not even be aware of it. So this main character is incredibly sensitive, even though he puts on the act of machismo. So he's fighting the last war, really, you know, and I think that's a fairly universal experience.
Well, thanks for clarifying that for me, because I was wondering that reading your story. Well, thanks, Shane. I'm going to move on to Tom McCulloch now. He has a story in here called The Drop. And basically, in the story, we have a guy who is getting paid to drop off a bag to someone, and he doesn't know what's in the bag. And he senses that whatever is in the bag seems to be rolling around in there. So it's almost to me like this character, this is a philosopher, though. He has this job to do. He's got to get to the drop point. But the way you write this is amazing, and all the tangents that he goes off on. I mean, he's like contemplating everything from suicide to footprints in the rain. And it was fantastic to read where he was going. So I'm wondering how much of this guy is from your true life experience yourself, Tom, without incriminating yourself at all here today.
Yeah. Well, way back in another life, eh? No, there's not a huge amount of me in there. I mean, it's all kind of projected. I mean, I used to live in Glasgow, and I spent a lot of time just sitting in bars, just watching folk and watching how they interacted. Just guys that would get there at 11 o'clock in the morning with newspaper, doing the races, first thing in the morning. Or they'd just be sitting there just staring into space. And I used to want what's going on with these guys, and people would come and go, their friends, hear little snippets of conversation every now and again. So I was kind of just drawn from that kind of observation, sitting in pub, watching people really.
Right. There was just great descriptiveness too of the area of where you were, and I assume it's in kind of a rural area, is it, where that was set?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I mean, it's the place where it's set is a real place. It's called Corrie Gorge. It's in the Highlands of Scotland. I mean, I live in Oxford, but I'm from the Highlands of Scotland, just north of Inverness. And I guess quite wild and remote up there, as you can imagine, probably quite akin to Vancouver Island in some ways. So there's a gorge up there called Corrie Gorge that I've been to many times as a child. Would stop off, and it's always dank there. I think you asked me in an email, always rain in Scotland, and yes, yeah, it does always seem rain in Scotland, and places like Corrie Gorge are always dank. There's always a low mist there, so it's quite an atmospheric place. So yeah, real place. And I just thought, well, what would happen if you take one of these characters from an urban setting, a Glasgow setting, and put them into that remote, rural setting, and what would happen? It seemed quite a nice, strange juxtaposition of it.
Well, that blows me away more now that I know that it truly was like a fictional piece for you, all of that stuff that you put in there. Because to me, like the 21 authors that are in this Jack anthology, it says right on the cover, a crime fiction anthology. My contribution is nonfiction, so I'm amazed at how people put stuff together just out of their imagination. I mean, I think I choose nonfiction because I don't have to worry about plot and structure, But I just wanted to say one more thing to you. You had me right at your first line, which was once told I look like Robert Mitchum. So I was right into your story right there. But great genre. I will want to move on to Gregory Jeffers now. Greg has a story that's set in 1940s Montreal. It's about a freshman lawyer who is preparing to go to trial to defend a pinup model. And this woman is fascinating. Okay, so she's beautiful, but she has gnarled, frostbitten ears. So I think you've taken like the femme fatale to a whole new level here. And I was wondering, Greg, did you ever suffer anything like that? Did you have frostbitten ears as a kid? Did you forget to wear a hat one day?
Well, I do live in the Adirondack Park, which is the largest. It's an 8 million acre park in the Adirondacks. That's the largest state park in the country, and it gets quite cold here. Saranac Lake, which is not far from me, is often recorded as the coldest place in the country. So I have experienced frostbite, not on my ears, but on my hands and feet. When I was a younger man, I was an avid mountain climber. So I'd experienced it. That wasn't really the impetus for this particular story. And the reason it got set in Montreal was that that's the closest urban center to where I live. It's closer than Albany, for example. I'm far enough north that Montreal is a half hour closer to me than Albany is. And it's my favorite city in the Americas so far. I was just there last month again. My grandfather, my real last name is Stone, which is another whole story. My mother changed it when she remarried. And when I asked her, when I turned 20, I said, "What's the deal on Stone? Where'd that name come from?" And she said, "Well, your grandfather came across the border from Quebec and changed his name from Larocque to Stone." So that was my family connection to the area. But the story was born more out of the idea that this woman could have fallen from a career high as a high fashion model and tumbled into the lower depths of fashion and beauty. And it happened because she was in a train wreck and was partially submerged in river water and lost one ear completely and the other ear almost completely. The other driving force for me was that I'm not connected to the character per se. I did clerk for the bar for 4 years, so a little bit of a connection, but it was more the sentiment that was a connection for me. I think a lot of people have experienced an early relationship with an older person of the opposite sex that's very meaningful, and that's really was the fruit of this story.
Yeah, it's like I think one of the few love stories in Jacked, if I could call it that. I mean, that's what I got from it. I was also amazed at your descriptions of smoking, and there's a lot of descriptions of the way she smokes a cigarette, and I'm like, are you a chain smoker or how that was fantastic.
I had a poetry professor in college who, in those days, you could still smoke in class, and he was always smoking, and he had every different possible manner of holding a cigarette. And I studied that from him. I don't know why. It was just fascinating to me. The very first class he came to, he walked in with a bag from South America, over the shoulder bag, and he pulled out a little jar and set it on his desk. And I couldn't figure out what he was going to do with the jar. It turned out that was his ashtray.
Right.
And he chain smoked through the whole class. But
sounds like a teacher that I would have loved to have had. Well, thanks a lot for your input there. It's answered some of my questions after I read your story there.
Thanks.
Now, I want to move on to Meredith Craig. She has a story in Jacked called "Living the Dolce Vita." So here we have a villainess who robs a jewelry store, makes her getaway on a Vespa, and joins a cabaret act on board a cruise ship. So there's so much going on in this story in such a short amount of time. But I was just struck with the whole, like, Meredith, were you ever a cabaret actor?
No, I was not a cabaret actor, and I don't think that you'd want to hear me sing.
Okay.
I was inspired. I do know tangentially. I know a cabaret singer, an older cabaret singer, who I just was inspired by, just her life. I mean, it's not anything like the character in the story, but just sort of the idea of being a traveling cabaret singer was really interesting to me. And I just sort of, I like the idea of this character being someone from feeling like a different era, almost like having sort of this charm that feels a little antiquated, but also, you know, kind of modern in that same way. And yeah, I just thought it was kind of a cool throwback. And I just was always interested in this cabaret singer's life that I know, and just kind of, you know, went in a direction with it.
Well, I totally believed it. I mean, and you have some good one-liners in there too. And I know I DM'd you on the twit about it, where I have this vinyl record of a performer called Ava Misbehavis, and she worked with a piano guy on stage, and you know she'd have those lines like, "This is a fast affair, please pay first," you know, and do her whole like Mae West kind of shtick, or "I'm the carefree type. If you care for me, I'm free." You know how it goes. So yeah, I wondered if maybe you had dabbled in the performance of it. Now, and you also have a Vespa. It's your getaway vehicle. Do you own a Vespa? Do you drive a Vespa? Or...
No, I've never been on a Vespa or a motorcycle or a motorbike or anything that would go fast that I would need a helmet to wear. But yeah, I just like the idea of it. Felt very Italian to me.
Yeah. So, and then I'm taking it you haven't robbed any jewelry stores either. That was fictional. So, yeah, I read it, and it's so cinematic to me, right? I was like thinking, oh, this could be episode 3 of the Netflix's Jacked series. You know, it was a really fun read for me. That it was great. So now I would love if you guys could share a snippet from your stories, and I guess we'll back up to the top here. It's Shane Levy with his story set in Ireland called "Fighting the Last War."
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, I will start partway through the story where the boys are at the cinema and they've had a confrontation with a young man who wants them to keep quiet, and they are now about to explode in the cinema bathroom. Specky lurches for the door, but Robert gets in front of him, grinning. Specky switches and tries to go the other way, but me and Mulligan close up, and all 3 of us are shouting at him now and laughing, and he's fucking losing it. And at last he snaps, "Fuck off!" And he grabs Mulligan and throws him hard, staggering back towards the door. Now, I said Mulligan's the biggest of us, so I'm a bit shocked, but at the same time, he's reaching out to grab me, and his face is this incredible storm of blood red rage. I can see his cheekbones popping. He's clenching his teeth so hard. He grabs my hoodie, and I don't know if he's going to deck me or what, so I swing a punch up and clip him in the mouth, and Robert tries to put him into a choke from behind. But Specky's too tall, and Robert's arm doesn't go around his throat. Specky roars and shakes me back and forth. Fuck, he's strong. My head is rattled, and then I'm flying back again and crack the back of my head in the wall hard enough to make sparks pop in my eyeballs. And then the door opens. Fucking hell, it's like slow motion. It's like something out of James Bond. There's a middle-aged fella with a big belly and a soft face, and he's carrying his daughter, tiny little kid, and they're probably in Adam's family or Encanto or something. The girl is gabbling away, but the man freezes when he sees the 3 of us, and we all freeze too. Specky lets me go and shoots for the door with his face all red. "Excuse me," he says, and he disappears. "All right here, lads," says the man. "We're right as rain," says Robert, and the three of us look at each other and have a good laugh. But I'm not laughing inside. I can't think straight. My gut's all cold jelly and my legs feel weak. The man takes his daughter into a cubicle, and I've no reason to stay, but I hang back, waiting for Robert and Mulligan to piss. Then the three of us march back through the cinema, back to James Bond. The lads are in good form, and I'm trying to keep it up, shouting and laughing and sort of shadow boxing, but I'm seeing this specky cunt's face with his tiny eyes locked on mine. I'm sure there's a lump growing at the back of my skull where I hit the wall. And Christ, I can feel this horrible, heavy wetness behind my eyes like I'm going to cry. So I break into a run. The lads run with me and we pound up the steps to take our seat, while all the time I'm dreading the thought that Specky is up there in the darkness already, sizzling with rage. Thank you.
Man, I was totally there. I was in that fight with you. And I got to tell you, on that character, when I read it, I was like rooting for him all the way. I really wanted him to win in the end. But thanks a lot, Shane. That was great. Now we're going to move on to my friend Tom McCulloch with his story called The Drop.
Cheers, Paul. Can I say, first of all, that was great, Jane. Really enjoyed that. Your story rings really true for me. Coming from the Highlands of Scotland, small town background. So I've got a bit here from The Drop. Kind of slightly dark as well, a bit like Shane's, with some Celtic darkness going on. So it's kind of just at the start of the story when the guy who's waiting to drop off the bag to whoever's coming to collect it is standing there in the middle of the bridge, and somebody approaches him who he wonders might be his connection, but isn't quite sure because he doesn't know who's going to. Here we go. I have a growing awareness of something I don't know is solid or spirit. Glance round and glance away. A man has appeared beside me, right there. How's he managed to sneak up on me? Maybe he was placed down by some giant. I look up again and he looks down. So I look down to see that he's looking at the bag. He looks up, must have seen the tense in my shoulders. When I look up, he doesn't look down again. Here's the fucker I've been waiting for. Morning, he says. Quiet here. I jog down here every Saturday. I've got these binoculars. I stop in the trees. In the summer, you get couples heading for quiet spots. I watch them with my binocular. Shame it's winter, I say. Indeed it is, my friend. And before he jogs away, he tells me, it's good to meet a man who understands. And I'm filled with sudden empathy for this common or garden pervert. I want to run after him and raise the bag, shake it back and forward so he can see the wobble. The two of us crouching down to see what's inside. I have to let him into my secret because someone always has to bear witness. Even this jogger with the shittiest trainers in the world. A dead giveaway to the claim he's a jogger, those in the know. There's a lope to his run, a lope that screams sex fiend. Something too smooth and dirty, as if he's got an itchy arse. He's always got an itchy arse. I know this. I find allies in the most unlikely of places. Lack judgment. That's why Dan, the man, trusts me. Sometimes I'm overwhelmed by such an intensity of goodwill towards my fellow humans that it becomes too much. I have a sudden, near uncontrollable urge to climb the barrier and fling myself off. Cheers.
Thanks, Tom. That was great. I wish I could talk like you. I wish I had your accent. Your character's like, if Voltaire was a thug, I think that would be the guy. So moving on, we have Gregory. We have where am I? We have Gregory, right? We're gonna do a bit from his story, Frostbite. So here's Greg.
Thanks, Paul. I'm just going to start at the beginning. And I'm going to set my timer because once I get the bit in my mouth, I just go on forever. Unless so just give me a second here. I'm going to set my timer for 2 minutes. Here we go. Frostbite. Instincts convinced me my first criminal case would be a piece of cake. It had better be. It was high profile and would make or break the rest of my legal career. It was pretty clearly a case of self-defense. She'd been denied bail the first go round, but my boss got us a second shot at it, citing the incompetence of her first and court-appointed lawyer. Turned out my only obstacle would be the client. I bounced my shiny saddle leather briefcase against lampposts and snow-capped trash cans along Boulevard Goanneau, trying to break it in a bit. The one-legged newsboy at the intersection of Rue Tanguay was shouting about Hitler, declaring himself Führer as I strode past. 5 minutes later, on my way to an interrogation room, the slap of my boots echoed off the tile walls of Montreal's oldest prison. The sight of her with a prison haircut set me on my heels, what with most of her scalp newly exposed. Only one ear badly mutilated, the other missing altogether. Frostbite had ravaged both 2 years earlier. Common knowledge in many circles, but being face to face made me wonder how beautiful she must have been before the tragic evening on the train. Because here in the Bordeaux prison, even disfigured, she was a stunner. I'd seen pictures of her, some in the Gazette and some in the files recently sent over by the Chief Defender's Office. But in those photos, she either still had ears or had long hair covering the mutilation. Still, none of the pictures had prepared me for the doozy she was in person. I'm not going to answer any of your questions if you keep staring at me like that. She shifted in the straight back chair, not out of uneasiness, I was certain. I sat at the pale oak table across from her and pulled a legal pad out of my briefcase. I'm sorry, Miss Stone. I don't mean to stare. She thought I was gaping at her deformity, but in all honesty, I was enraptured by her beauty. I turned my focus to the pad. Well, it's not like I'm one of those legless guys. There's the timer. Thank you.
You ended on legless guys. That's fantastic. Wow. So moving on now, we have Meredith Craig, who's going to read a bit from Living the Dolce Vita.
Okay, I'm just going to start from the beginning as well. Ginger Price's white-gloved hand twirled the diamond tennis bracelet around her wrist. "I'll take them all," she said to the shop assistant, who didn't speak English. With the other hand, Ginger pulled a Tiffany blue Glock out of her Ferragamo tote and pointed at the shop girl, who understood perfectly now. She swiped the diamond necklaces, opal stone brooches, sapphire rings, and jewel-encrusted tiaras into a velvet bag. "Don't forget the Viva diamond." Ginger motioned with the gun for her to bring the clearest red diamond ever excavated around to the other side of the counter, away from the cameras and the emergency bell. "Grazie," Ginger said, smiling through her mask. "I thought it'd be bigger, but you know what they say, with diamonds, size isn't everything." Ginger hopped on the waiting Vespa and told the driver to step on it. "Get me to the ferry station. I've got a cruise to catch," she said. The driver took off like a rocket down the winding Positano streets, pressing his foot on the accelerator even as the tires screeched. The grape arbors were no match for the construction of the motorbike, which cracked through them as easily as a curtain. "I'll give you a tip if you get me there in one piece," she said, as they blew past a church, barely missing tourists slouching across the street. Pedestrians screamed, pointing. It's like they've never seen the Queen of England on a Vespa before. Behind her, tire marks charred the street where they had taken a sharp left, plowing past an outdoor cafe, almost knocking over a basket of lemons, and coming to a full stop in front of the Dolce Vita cruise ship. In the roads above, the sirens wound around the steep cliff. Ginger jumped off the bike and peeled the latex mask off, careful not to smudge her makeup. Then she tucked a pair of diamond earrings into the driver's shirt pocket, securing the rest of the jewels into her purse, and rushed to the jetty. The blue and green water lapped the dock as if there were all the time in the world. Thanks.
Great. Thanks a lot, Meredith, for that. Well, I see that we're just over half an hour, and I think that's pretty good for a Zoom call. on a book launch. And I'm so glad my iPhone 7 didn't blow up today during this whole thing. But I wanted to thank Run Amok Books and all you guys for popping in today and trying to get the word out on this fantastic crime anthology that has 21 authors in it. It's available at all the usual places, and it's edited by Vern Smith. He did a great job. All of his stuff is probably in a thread on YouTube here, so you can check out all his crime novels. And I just wanted to thank all of you guys for showing up, doing this, and have a good day or night, as the case may be.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
Cheers, Paul.
Thank you,
Much
Paul.
appreciated,
Thanks, Paul.
Adrian.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
all.